All right. A lot of people have asked me over the years about how to manage a chronic disease while in medical school. And currently, my chronic disease is acting up. I'm not feeling so hot, and I figured now's a good time to discuss it. I have inflammatory bowel disease. There's two types. There's Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Mine is IBD indeterminate, meaning that it has traits of both, somewhere in the middle. And it's actually been pretty well managed. I got sick when I was 18 in the first few months of college, February of my freshman year, and I started end of September, so a few months in. And I've actually been pretty well managed, especially over the last few years when I left residency and I was sleeping a lot more and really prioritizing nutrition and exercise and all that stuff to a higher degree than I was before. I was already prioritizing it, but now I took it one step further. For some reason, ever since December, things have been a little bit slightly rocky, not too bad, but kind of getting worse and worse. And recently, haven't been feeling too hot, and I figure now is as good of a time as any to talk a little bit more about this issue and how I managed during medical school. So if you are in a similar position, you have a chronic illness and you're trying to get through college or medical school or some other challenging time in your life, then hopefully these tips help. So the first thing I would say is understand that things get better. If you're like me and you were living completely healthy, normal life until a certain age, and then boom, chronic illness, it can feel like your whole world is imploding around you. And that's not a fun feeling, but understand that it will get better, right? So the first 2 years were probably really, really tough. Just adjusting, learning about what works, what doesn't work, trying to figure out how I need to shift my life. And after that, it becomes kind of the norm. I mean, nowadays I've had it for around 14 years. It's almost hard for me to think of a time when I didn't have IBD and I didn't have to manage my diet a little bit closely or whatever. Just, it's so normal now, right? The time when it does come front and center is when it acts up, when you have an acute flare, when you feel a lot of pain, it's hard to eat food, you go on a full liquid diet, things like that, which are not as fun. But the key thing, actually the most important thing when you're dealing with situations like this is to understand that your self-talk is the most important thing, because reality, I've said this so many times, but reality is far more in your perception than in the actual events around you. Reality is more subjective and flexible than we think. Let's say you're in a rough patch. You could approach things in two different ways. And what I mean by that is when things get challenging, you generally have one of two options on how you want to respond. Again, this is a lot easier and much more applicable paradoxically when things are more challenging. So if you stub your toe, it's very difficult to see the utility in you stubbing your toe. It's hard for you to derive value and tell yourself a story or a meaning or a purpose from you stubbing your toe that will actually land and actually hold impact and actually seem meaningful and not like some silly joke. So when things are getting tough and you feel at the lowest of lows, like rock bottom, it's actually easier to do this paradoxically, at least a lot easier than if you stub your toe. Which is to say either you sink or you swim. Those are the two options you have. So you either pull yourself up, and it's gonna take some energy, but you use sublimation, we'll talk about that shortly. You take those negative emotions and you repurpose them to something productive, or you sink into a depression, you spiral downwards, and things just get worse and worse, right? So you have two options, and obviously people are gonna choose the former than the latter. Now, this isn't to say that if you are spiraling downwards that it's your fault and that you could have done this and yada, yada. I mean, there's so much nuance and so many exceptions to the rule, so please, of course, speak to your mental health professional, your physician, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just speaking to my experience, okay? So my experience was I had these two options, and I felt like I had a lot of reasons to be pretty miserable. A lot of reasons. Family life imploded, parents separated. I lived with my mom and brother in a one-bedroom apartment where I shared a queen-size mattress with my mom for several years. My brother slept on the couch. We all shared one single bathroom. Sharing a bathroom with two other adults when you have a new GI illness, you need to use the bathroom sometimes extremely urgently. There's a lot of pain there. So much so that I promised myself that when I finally could afford to get a place that had multiple bathrooms, I would get a place with multiple bathrooms so I never had to feel that pain of waiting for a toilet when someone else was there and like you're knocking, like, hey, hurry up, I'm like in so much pain. It's just like, it was really, it left a mark. And now I live in a place that does have multiple bathrooms, so that worked out. So there's a lot of negative emotions when you're looking at the health issues that don't seem deserved, right? It's like, well, I was already a pretty healthy person when I was younger. I cared a lot about fitness and health ever since high school. And I was pretty, like I ate much cleaner than the average person even back then. Now it's much more so, but even back then. So you feel like this isn't deserved. This isn't like, oh, I wasn't doing reckless things and I wasn't treating my body poorly, and yet this still happened. So there was frustration there. There was frustration around the financial situation that we were in. There was frustration around some of the family drama that occurred. There was frustration around a lot of things at that time. But this brings me to my next point, which is to repurpose those emotions for something that is productive. So this is sublimation. So sublimation in the science or physics sense would be solid to gas transition, right? And you skip liquid. But sublimation in psychology is when you're taking emotions or mental states that are less conducive, less socially acceptable, and repurposing them such that they have a form of expression, but now that form of expression is being channeled into something that is socially acceptable, that is productive, that can actually move your life forward. I've talked about this before, but I sublimated a lot of the negative energy, a lot of that anger, frustration, etc., into my academic pursuits. So I was already a very good student. I 4.0 in high school and whatever, but I took it up a notch or two. So I wanted to be the one setting the curves in my class. I wanted to get 99.9 percentile on the MCAT. I wanted to get into top medical schools. I was so driven to become a physician, to become a doctor, to become the best doctor I could be. And I took a lot of that negativity and rechanneled it. So that was very useful. That ran its course for several years, but at a certain point I realized I couldn't just rely on negativity and that kind of fuel to keep me going year after year after year for decades. So things in medical school shifted a little bit in some minor ways, in that I didn't enjoy college as much because I was having health issues and then was working really hard. So in medical school, especially in the first 2 years, I still was working very hard, but I was taking that intensity and now working hard and playing hard and being very precise with my time. I really honed the time management skills, which I think is almost a necessity if you have a chronic illness, because life's not fair. You spend more time dealing with your chronic illness, going to doctor's appointments, getting medical procedures or tests, just dealing with things, in the comfort of your home when your disease acts up, right? So if I was having a flare or I ate something and then the next 2 days were pretty rocky because that thing that I ate didn't suit me, then I'm paying a price, right? And it's not like I can just stay at home and still get work done. Like, I'm feeling bad, I'm more fatigued, I need more sleep. And then even when I'm in the restroom, I would love to be able to be productive, hey, I'm gonna be here for 30 minutes, bam, let's get some work done. But it's so hard to do that if you are in pain. If you're just trying to distract yourself and not focus on work. You can't do meaningful work at that time. So in med school, I did become far more intentional with how I spent my already very limited time. And I recall one of my good friends in med school, I took a lot of pride in this, because sometimes we work so hard and we climb so far up this mountain and we keep looking up to say, oh man, I still got so long to go. And you don't take a moment to look down and see how far you've come. And it was a moment when he said, Kevin, how do you do this? You're dealing with going to infusions, which take several hours. And especially back then, it fatigued me so much. Going to an infusion afterwards, my body would be so drained, so incredibly drained. Nowadays, not so much. Maybe the body acclimates to that over the years. And yet, you do that on a Sunday. We have our midterm or our block final, whatever, on a Monday, and yet you come through and then for cards, you set the curve. For this one, you're your top 3 student. How are you doing that, man? It doesn't make sense, because you have this thing that is limiting your time, limiting your focus, even the day before a test, and you still crush it. What? This doesn't make sense. And sometimes it really helps to have people around you that can build you up and remind you of the cool things that you're doing. That's something to be proud of, right? And sometimes, again, we forget to look down. We only look up where we want to go, that we forget that. And we were talking about how if I didn't leave plastic surgery residency, I would have been in my final year right now. And how I was glad that, I made the decision, and how my life is going right now, and all the things I'm really excited about, and all the things that I also want to still do. I'm still, this is cool, but I want to grow my car YouTube channel. I want to the business for Med School Insiders and for MEM. I have these goals, and the same thing kind of happened where he mentioned dude, the fact that you built what you built, regardless of whether or not you have a chronic illness, right? But that wasn't even part of the conversation. Just saying the fact that you built what you built is mad impressive, dude. It's really mad impressive. Where you came from, your 1-bedroom apartment with your mom and brother to where you are now, kudos, man. That's a lot of hard work, and it's paid off, and it's really admirable. And sometimes we're so hard on ourselves that we forget to appreciate. So that really put things in perspective and made me a little bit more grateful. And so, you know what? Instead of focusing on the unchecked items on the to-do list and where I wanna go and the goals for this year and yada, 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 it's okay to take a moment and pause and reflect and be proud of what you've done. Again, if you have a chronic illness, don't just focus on the fact that you have so many more things that you want to do. Take a moment to pause and appreciate what you've already done so far. Now, I was very fortunate, of course, because not only did I have some killer friends like this buddy of mine, but my mom was extremely supportive. To give you an idea of the kind of person that I've always been, so part of me is trying to be thankful and grateful for this experience of a chronic illness because I think it has helped me in so many ways. I think I was already very disciplined and hardcore, but I became even more so, which allowed me to achieve greater levels of success that I'm still reaping the rewards of to this day. And I would also say that it has made me much more focused on health and the finiteness of life. And I think that I may not have made the decision that I did regarding residency if it wasn't for this illness. Now, I'm not saying that I resigned because of IBD, right? What I'm saying is that I understood that life and health, etc., are finite. And when we're in our 20s, we feel like life is gonna last forever. But because of my experience, I had a little bit more perspective on the fact that, hey, I can either do plastic surgery or business, whereas maybe if I didn't have the condition that I have, maybe I would have said, hey, you know what? It, I'm gonna do both. I'm gonna just grind hard for 6 years. And even though my health will suffer and even though yada, yada, like it's gonna be worth it. And I'm very glad that I made the decision that I did because there have been so many other benefits that I didn't even see coming when I made that decision. But anyways, going back to my personality, right? When I was in 3rd grade, I remember my mom would talk to my older brother who was maybe in 5th grade at the time and say, hey, you gotta try harder in school. You gotta get better grades, A's and B's only, right? Like we can't have any C's and, you know, try harder in school, do your homework, et cetera, et cetera. And then she came over to me to have a conversation and it was the complete opposite, to say, Kevin, it's okay. I know you like being competitive. You don't have to be number 1. It's all right. You don't always have to be number 1. So the reason I bring that up is you can craft the story however you want to craft the story, because that's the beautiful thing about life is that we're the authors of our own story. So I can look back and say, I already was an intense person and this condition has allowed me to really focus on that foundation I already have in terms of competitiveness and wanting to achieve and the ambition and take it up a notch, right? So I am choosing to instill value in that. There is an alternate reality, right? There's an alternate reality that I have never entertained because it doesn't serve me. That alternate reality is that I was so ambitious, look at how much more I could have done if I did not have any issues, if I didn't have any roadblocks, right? But if that doesn't serve me, then why would I ever consider that? At the same time, I don't wanna make it seem like you are gonna have this incredible resolve and you're never gonna falter at all. There have been times, I mean, even in the last week where I was like, I had a really painful day a few days ago and I was like, God damn, this sucks. And I just felt so frustrated. I was like, God, I just want the pain to stop, right? And I think that's normal. I think it's fine to sometimes waver a little bit. Like we're human, right? We're not machines, we're not robots. And it's about reminding yourself during those times and sometimes reaching out to loved ones, right? People that can support you and that can give you that emotional support and sometimes even other support, right? That you may need depending on what your condition is, depending on what your needs are at the time. So there's a fine line between telling yourself the right story and deluding yourself. So you gotta be realistic at the same time, right? I'm never gonna eat certain super spicy foods, even though I used to love spicy food when I was a kid, because now it would completely wreck me. I mean, that's a very small limitation. That's almost a meaningless limitation, but you can apply that to other things too. One example would actually be fitness. So I have been lifting weights since high school, and there have been years when I was very consistent. There have been years when I was not so consistent. But when you look at me, you're like, D-Y-E-L, do you even lift, bro? So, so right now, I mean, I gained a lot of weight since August of last year. I was on a bulk, and since about January, I've been cutting. As designed, you know, I have a coach, so this is all very intentional. And it's very difficult, like when things are acting up, to maintain the protocol, to hit your macros. So right now, during a cut, I gotta keep high protein, otherwise I'm gonna cause muscle atrophy, muscle wasting. I don't want that. Like all that hard work of me lifting weights and slowly gaining weight finally, like that's just the reality, is that I'll probably never be the same level of physique that I could have been without having any GI issues. But that doesn't mean I give up. That just means I try harder. That means I'm a little bit more intelligent and intentional with my approach. And sure, maybe I'm only gonna ever achieve 80% of what I could otherwise achieve, but that's still good. I'm still happy with 80%. The other thing is to try to find the silver lining, try to find the good. I only started fasting, in 2018 or I think it was 2019. I started fasting 4 years ago. I started doing water only fasts. And the reason was because my gut was just not happy. I was like, you know what? I know water only fasting is good for me. Why don't I just try this when my gut is making it very difficult for me to eat normal food? And I think there's a lot of benefits to water only fasting. I've actually done videos about my water only fast. I've done dozens of fasts at this point. Some of them are 2 days, some of them are 4 days, some are 3 days. It's helped a lot with discipline. It's helped a lot with, even earlier this week when I was in so much pain, the whole next day I just didn't eat. I was like, you know what? Let me allow the GI system to rest. And I didn't eat for maybe 28 hours, something like that. And it helped so much. I came back and then I had a liquid diet to see like, okay, I'm not gonna have food right now. Let me just see what happens if I have a smoothie, a meal replacement shake. And I was like, okay, I'm so much better off now. I'm learning to manage the condition. And I had a lot of those insights based on extracting value from the times when things were not going so well. The other thing is that, real talk, it helps so much. It's like a vaccine against taking things for granted. It's not 100% effective, but I take things far less for granted now than I did before. Things just like eating, when I'm enjoying food, it is such a pleasure. Like before, maybe I'd be at a 8 out of 10 with a really amazing culinary experience. And now it's like a 10 out of 10. I'm just so grateful to be alive, to be eating this food and to be having this gustatory pleasure, and it's just like, it's fantastic, it's awesome. And I feel that the enjoyment of certain meals has been elevated because you don't have good emotion without bad. You can't appreciate things without seeing what it's like when they're lacking. All right, so to wrap it up, this video, as you can already tell, is very unstructured. I didn't have a plan, I just wanted to sit here and talk to you guys. So if you're still here watching this video, then thank you. So to wrap it up, I'd say, number 1, it gets better. Number 2, focus on your self-talk. Understand that your reality is much more flexible than most people realize. That doesn't mean to be delusional, but to be intentional with the stories you tell yourself and derive value from. Number 3, rely on your support systems, the friends, the families, the loved ones that you can rely on when things are getting tough. And number 4, keep experimenting and learning and trying to figure out how to manage whatever you're dealing with in the best way possible. So for me, a lot of it was managing my diet and managing stress and sleep and all those things. But even beyond that, I found so much value in trying to intentionally, how can I make these infusions less of a time sink? How can I extract value and get work done during them? Because, okay, cool, I'm too fatigued afterwards, I can't study afterwards, so cool, let me do this and that. And it's okay to say, certain things in your life will be harder. It's gonna be a lot harder for me to gain the physique that I want, despite putting in insane amounts of work.
You can do it safely, bro. Being how lean you are is more dangerous for you than being on a little bit of test, probably. If you just
test, D-ball, just basic stuff.
But that's okay. It's like, there's pros and cons to everything. And if you're able to really focus on the benefits that your situation has provided you, you're gonna be a lot happier in the end. Anyways, I hope that was valuable to at least one person out there who might be in a similar circumstance. I remember I was super secretive about IBD until residency because it could be perceived as a liability where I wouldn't be able to match into a program I wanted to. And then I read this book by this former NFL player who discussed his journey and his life with ulcerative colitis. And it was so impactful and such a powerful influence on me that I decided to be much more open about it to hopefully help others who find themselves in similar situations. So anyways, if you guys have any thoughts, comments, maybe you want to share your own experience, let me know with a comment down below. Much love, my friends. I'll see you guys in the next one.